and welcome to Macy Cooks. Today is a special video because I'm going to be teaching you a recipe that I think you will use weekly once you know how to make it. It's great being able to make a cinnamon roll or being able to make cookies, but when it comes down to it, there's some recipes that you use more than others, and today's recipe is one of those. I'm going to teach y'all how to make sandwich bread. Now there's a lot of different types of sandwich bread, and of course I love whole wheat just as much as the next person. However, sometimes you don't have everything you need for that. White bread, however, is something that you typically have everything for. Just because it's simple doesn't mean it's not delicious. This bread is some of the most luscious, decadent, and delicious bread I've ever had. So without further ado, let's get baking. To begin, add 1 cup of whole milk to a microwave-safe bowl or container. Put it in the microwave and microwave it for about a minute. The best thing about this recipe is how easily it comes together. In just a couple hours, you can have bread for the rest of the week. Other good thing is that this recipe can be doubled or even tripled very easily. Everything's just a 1-for-1. And also, once you've prepared it and baked it, you can put it inside of a plastic bag and freeze it for up to like a month. Once that milk is warm, add 2 tablespoons of butter to the warm milk and mix it up. What we're trying to do is melt that butter, but we don't want the milk to be too scorching hot because we're actually going to proof our yeast in this mixture. Now that that milk is warm and the butter is mixed in, we are going to add 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast, or 1 packet, to the top. Then to that yeast you're going to add 2 tablespoons of sugar. By adding that sugar to the yeast and the milk and the butter, you're giving that yeast something to eat. Okay, we're going to set that aside so it can start doing its thing, and then move on to the dry ingredients. In this bowl I have 3 cups of all-purpose flour, and to that I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of salt. Like I mentioned earlier, this recipe is super simple. There's not many ingredients, but it is an enriched dough, which means that we've added butter and milk to the equation. By adding the butter and the milk to the dough, what you're doing is making a more moist and more rich dough. While we're waiting on that yeast to activate, let's talk about something else that you could make at home if you were in a bind. As you can see, I've hand washed some dishes over here, and that's because I'm trying to save my dishwasher pods so that I can do big loads if I need to. But if you ever realize that you are completely out of dishwasher soap and you would like to do a load of dishes, you might have something at home that you could make some out of. If you combine about a 1/4 size amount of your dishwashing liquid in the dishwasher and then add 2 teaspoons of baking soda, you can actually run your dishwasher on that. Make sure that you add the baking soda. If you just put dish liquid in your dishwasher, it will fill up your entire house with bubbles. I'm speaking from experience on this. When I lived at home and was like 17, my sisters and I shirked off the responsibilities of cleaning the house after our dad told us to, and then waited till the last minute to do all the chores, which included dishwashing. Now, if we'd just done the dang chores when he told us to, we could have called him and been like, hey, we're out of dishwashing liquid. But we didn't want him to know that we'd waited till the last minute, so I thought, in my genius 16-year-old brain, let's just put some dish liquid in there. Cut to, the entire kitchen is filling up with bubbles, and it looks like something from the Three Stooges. My 3 sisters and I started throwing towels down on the floor and flinging ourselves on top of them. We took our youngest sister and grabbed her by the ankles and were actually swinging her on a towel, trying to like shove the bubbles into the corner. My sister Jessica was scooping some up with a bowl and throwing it out the window in the kitchen. Danielle was standing guard at the front, and when my dad started pulling in, she was yelling like, he's here, he's here. I've never been more scared in my life. For the record, that buffed out. He came in and was impressed with how nice the house smelled. Add the baking soda. Just add the baking soda. Alrighty, now that that yeast is ready, it has started to bubble and smells just generally yeasty. Add that to the flour and the salt. Grab your rubber spatula and make sure to get all that goodness out of there. We are going to mix this dough in the bowl using a rubber spatula. I will tell you, this is going to be a very sticky dough at first. So because of that, I kind of like to use the rubber spatula for the initial mix just to avoid some of the gunk getting between your fingers and whatnot. But we are going to ultimately switch over to our hand. Once it has come together, go ahead and switch over to your hand and start doing that claw technique that I've taught y'all before. Basically, you're making the letter C with your hand and squeezing through the dough. You're trying to introduce as much of the yeast to that flour as you can. Once the dough has come together, we're gonna knead it on the counter for about 10 minutes. What you're trying to do by kneading it so vigorously and for so long is build up as much gluten as possible so that that structure will be super tight like sandwich bread. In contrast to what we normally do, which is knead on a dry surface, you actually want this to be a little bit greased. You can use butter if you want to, but I keep a little bit of vegetable oil in a squirt bottle, so I'm just gonna add a tiny bit to the counter. I mean, you don't want this to be like a slip and slide or anything, but we're wanting to add some oil to this dough. Before you begin to knead, add a tiny bit of oil to your hands. I know this seems really bizarre, but what you're trying to do is create a super smooth and super enriched dough. That oil is going to help that. Pulling from the side furthest away from me, I am actually bringing it towards me and pushing it in with the butt of my hand. Well, it has been 10 minutes. I'm feeling fairly buff, and we've got this beautiful soft dough. What I'd like for you to do is gather up the sides, pinching them in at the center here, trying to actually erase that seam. And then once you've sealed up the seam, flip it over, spin it, and then actually pull it towards you on the counter, trying to make it as tight as possible. Retrieve the bowl you mixed it in, add a little bit of that vegetable oil, and transfer the dough inside. I like to kind of spin mine around a little and get it covered in that oil. We're gonna cover it up with a hand towel and let it rise for about an hour. It does not have to fully double in size because it is gonna have a secondary rise after this. Go ahead and preheat your oven to 350. Once we have the bread shaped and in the bread pan, we're gonna set it next to the stove and let it rise. It's been an hour, but before we start shaping, let's talk about the pan that you're gonna need. This is a 9.5 by 5.5 by 2.5. You can find them at Walmart or on Amazon. They're great for sandwich bread or banana bread or any type of bread like that. Day 3 of quarantine's already got me a little crazy. If you do not have one of these pans, do not fret. I would suggest getting one because I think you'll use it all the time, but if you don't have one yet and want to make some this week, I will tell you what I've done in the past. When all I had was this pan, which is basically just a brownie pan, what I did was I took some aluminum foil and I actually shaped it in half and made like a little wall down the center that was very reinforced with a ton of foil, and then put the bread in there. It was a little rigged, but it worked. And if all you've got is a 9 by 18, you could do the same thing with the foil. Just make like a little boat type situation and just shape it tightly. I'm all about just figuring out how to make it work, okay? Whatever pan you're going to be using and grease it. You know, Crayola method, it's my favorite. You'll know you have enough butter if you sing happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday dear sandwich bread, happy birthday to you. As you can see, the dough has risen significantly. I wouldn't say it's necessarily doubled, but that's okay. Grab your rolling pin and begin to roll it out into a rectangle. Once you have it basically a rectangle, I grab the edges and kind of pinch them out a little bit just to get her there. Then I take it and start to roll it up like you would a cinnamon roll or any type of Swiss roll. Make sure to grab on the edges and pull a little bit. You want to try to keep it as flush as possible with the end of the roll. Once you've achieved a roll, flip it over to where that seam is on top. You're gonna kind of pinch here, just like we did when we were creating that ball earlier, and seal up that seam. Now don't worry, this isn't gonna be on the top of your loaf, so it's not gonna look all, you know, ugly and whatnot. It'll be real cute. It's gonna be cute, it's gonna be so cute. Livy's very concerned that you'd get this right, okay? So don't mess it up, all right? Now, once the top has been sealed, turn it on its side, grab from the underneath here, which is gonna be the top of your roll, pinch and fold it over and seal that seam. Roll your roll back and forth slightly, make sure it's all rounded on the edges, and then once you have her just right, lift her up gently and transfer her into your bread pan. You will notice there's quite a bit of room. Anyway, there's quite a bit of room left, which is good. That gives it a lot of room to rise and fill up all this area. So what we're gonna do is cover it in a hand towel and let it rise next to a warm stove for about an hour. Welcome back. It has risen for an hour and I'm gonna show you what it looks like. As you can see, she has risen significantly and filled up this pan. It is all the way out to the exterior walls and has actually started to bubble up a little bit on the top. Now, it's actually gonna get bigger than this in the oven while it's baking. So go ahead and transfer this to a 350-degree oven for approximately 30 minutes.
I wish we could eat it.
Oh, we will very soon. Okay.
It'll be so much yummy.
It's gonna be so much yummy. Take the melted butter and pour some over the top. I use my little dibbler and then just spread that around. Now that you have that butter on top, I take some whole rolled oats, which if you don't have any, this step is not necessary. I just enjoy it. And I sprinkle it over the top. Okay, once you've got it topped, return it to the 350-degree oven for about 15 more minutes. 30 minutes. And it's so beautiful. You will know that it's ready when you turn it out into your hand and you thump it. It will sound hollow. Another way for you to tell that it is ready is if you use a thermometer and do an internal temp check and it's reached 190 degrees. And before I make a sandwich, I wanted to show you just a slice. Look at how thick and dense this structure is. Look at the beautiful crust. It's perfect, guys.
I wish I could eat it.
Eat it. How is it?
Great.
This bread is to die for. It makes the most beautiful sandwiches, and my favorite part is that no one's there watching you, so you can slice it as thick as you want to.
Crust is good.
I thought so too.
We like to move it, move it. We like to move it, move it.
The best part, in my opinion, is you know everything that went into this bread. No added preservatives, nothing artificial, nothing weird, nothing questionable. It's just bread. One of the best things that I've gotten from baking, aside from the delicious food, is the confidence in knowing that we're taken care of. At the end of the day, I can make bread. So can you, and that's the best part. You don't have to worry about whether the grocery store's out of bread because you can make it at home in less than 3 hours. Whether you like yours with turkey and cheese, ham and cheese, roast beef and cheese, peanut butter jelly.
I like peanut butter jelly.
Me too. Peanut butter jelly. Get baking, y'all.